Hello and welcome back to Nostalgia Rewind, the series where I take a look back at some of the games I feel most nostalgic for and see how they hold up now. Today's game is New Super Mario Bros. Wii.
New Super Mario Brothers! Whee!
New Super Mario Bros. Wii released in 2009, and it's one of the highest selling Wii games of all time, selling more than 30 million copies. It's definitely one of the most popular games on this system, and is one of the games that I played most with my friends and family when I was younger. I have so many great memories of this game, and I'm sure there are a lot of you out there who also love this game and have tons of nostalgia for it. So today I'll be taking a look back at this game, playing through all of the levels and giving my thoughts on the game as a whole. First I'll go over the general gameplay and items, then I'll get into each of the individual worlds and levels. Let's get started. New Super Mario Bros. Wii is a 2D platformer starring Mario and all his friends in the Mushroom Kingdom. The New Super Mario Bros. Series is kind of like a reboot of the classic 2D Mario games. The first game in this new series was on the DS, so it had been a while since there was a brand new 2D Mario game on a Nintendo home console. New Super Mario Bros. Wii uses largely the same art style as the DS game, only in a higher resolution. The basic plot setup is the same as it always is in a Mario game. Peach gets kidnapped by Bowser and you have to save her by completing levels and reaching Bowser's castle. Completing levels will be made much easier if you have some power-ups to help you, including mushrooms, fire and ice flowers, mini mushrooms, and stars. And this time you have two brand new power-ups, the propeller mushroom and the penguin suit. Both these new power-ups are a little overpowered. The propeller mushroom lets you fly up into the air when you shake the Wii remote, and then you can glide back down safely or spiral downwards quickly. This lets you skip over large parts of levels, and can get you out of any tricky situation. And the penguin suit stops you from slipping on ice, plus you can shoot ice balls, which basically makes the ice flower irrelevant. Yoshi also makes his first appearance in this new series in this game, and he's as great as always. While riding Yoshi, you can eat up fruit and enemies, and you get an extra flutter jump that lets you go higher. I also love how there are some extra drums added to the music while you're on Yoshi. And I love how some of the enemies dance to the music. There's always some cool secrets and hidden exits in 2D Mario games, and while I won't be covering every single secret, I will talk about a couple of them. And each level has 3 star coins to collect. They're lots of fun to search for, but sadly there isn't much to do with them once you collect a lot. You can spend them at Peach's castle to unlock hint movies, but I don't think those are very useful. The biggest reason to collect them all is so that you can unlock extra levels in World 9, but you don't find that out until you're already there. In World 1 I collected a lot of star coins, but I kind of stopped searching for them the further I got into the game. As for the general gameplay, you can play with a Wii remote turned sideways or a Wii remote and nunchuck. I prefer using a nunchuck because the button layout is more comfortable and the Wii remote D-pad can sometimes be unreliable for tight platforming. For the most part, the gameplay is fun and precise, although I did have a couple of times where I died and it felt out of my control, like when enemies appear out of nowhere, or when it looks like there's a platform but there really isn't. This isn't exactly the greatest 2D platformer of all time or anything, but it's really solid and the gameplay is very enjoyable. It feels great to successfully dodge lots of obstacles and work your way through levels. While playing, you can get into a flow of platforming that feels really great and makes completing levels really enjoyable. One small problem I have with this game is that when you die, it kicks you all the way back to the overworld, which means on some of the tougher levels, you might have to spend a lot of time going back and forth between loading screens. Each level does have one checkpoint flag, so you don't have to start all the way at the beginning of the level, but getting kicked out to the map can still be pretty annoying. I know that's how 2D Mario games always are, but after playing something like the new Donkey Kong Country games where you just respawn at your last checkpoint, it can feel a little old-fashioned and frustrating. But overall, this game is very good. I know there's a lot of people who don't like the oversimplified visuals, but I actually like them and think they work well for these games. You can also play with up to 4 players with local multiplayer, and that makes the game even more fun and chaotic. You can pick up the other players, which leads to a lot of mayhem and trying to throw each other off cliffs. It becomes a whole lot more difficult to beat levels once you add in some extra players. And that's about it for the general gameplay overview. So let's get into the individual worlds, starting with World 1. Kicking off World 1 with the first level, we have some pretty standard Mario platforming along some green grassy hills, and there's also some cool spinning circles of land that make things a little more interesting. This is also the first level that gives you the propeller mushroom, and there's some higher platforms in the air that you can only get to with that power-up. It's tough for me to analyze the quality of level design in this game because all the levels seem super iconic to me since I grew up playing them. This isn't the greatest level design of all time, but it's pretty solid. Now let's move on to level 1-2. This level takes you underground where there are some really cool moving crystal structures that make the platforming more fun. This is the first time you can get an ice flower, and that makes things easier since you can freeze enemies and throw them to take out more bad guys. There's also some platforms that you control with motion controls while standing on them, which is pretty cool. Then there's this segment where you can get a star and totally just destroy everything in your way. And before we move on to level 1-3, let's go over to this mushroom house where you can play a power-up panels minigame to earn some power-ups. Obviously this is just luck-based, but it's still pretty fun. They do get old after a while, but it's always nice to get a few extra power-ups that you can use on the overworld map screen. I did manage to get a perfect game one time, but you'll usually end up with just a couple extra power-ups out of these mushroom houses. Moving on to level 1-3, you get to team up with Yoshi for the first time. Yoshi makes this level a breeze, and he also allows you to get to a secret exit that leads you to a cannon that shoots you all the way to World 5. But we're not going to skip ahead, so let's move on to level 1-Castle. But before we can do that, Toad goes and gets himself kidnapped by a Goomba, as if Mario didn't have enough on his hands trying to save Princess Peach. Toad rescue levels are where you have to find the Toad in a question block and then carry him to the end. These levels pop up a lot throughout the game, and I've got to be completely honest, I usually just skip them. Maybe that makes me a horrible person, but I've got a video to make, so Toad can wait. Level 1-Castle has lots of moving blocks, swinging platforms, and some dry bones. Dry bones can only be defeated with an ice flower, and lucky for us there are lots in this level. And once we beat a very easy fight with Larry, we're on to level 1-4, which is an underwater level. Mario doesn't control super well underwater, and it basically feels like you're playing Flappy Bird trying to avoid enemies. Ice flowers are super useful in water levels since you can freeze enemies and use them as platforms to get back on land. Then once we get past these super annoying purple fishes, this level is done. But there's a Goomba in your way stopping you from moving forward, and if you run into it, you'll be thrown into this minigame where you have to collect some Toad bubbles to save him. I would say these are annoying, but once you rescue Toad, he rewards you with 3 mushrooms, which is actually pretty useful. Here we have a split path, where we can choose which level to take to get to the final castle of this world. Level 1-5 has you jumping around mushrooms in the sky, and this level can be completed pretty easily if you have a propeller mushroom. Level 1-6 has a lot more of the spinning circles of land from the first level, and it ends with this cool sequence with 3 big land wheels where you can really build up some momentum. And finally we've arrived at the last castle for this world, which has some big metal gears and a lot of lava. You have to be careful not to be smashed in between the moving gear parts, and there's also some thwomps to avoid too. The rematch with Larry is made a bit more difficult when Kamek throws some magic onto the floor, making the platforms move up and down. But as long as you're careful, this fight is still pretty easy. Mario grabs the key and we're off to World 2. World 2 is full of desert-themed levels and areas, and starting in level 2-1 we have these fountains of sand that shoot up into the air, but you have to be careful and time it right so you don't fall into a hole. It gets harder once some piranha plants and flying Koopa paratroopers are thrown into the mix. Once we get past this last boomerang bro, it's time to move on to level 2-2, which deals with barrels and spikes. It's lots of fun to throw barrels and avoid spike balls, and there's even some cool physics stuff where the big spike balls stop halfway up a hill and start rolling down the other way. And it's always so satisfying to ground pound onto a slope and take out enemies while sliding down. There's this pipe that leads to a mini mushroom, which lets you walk on water and makes your jump super floaty. This power-up isn't very helpful since you die in only one hit, so it really just makes things harder. There are these mini pipes that can only be accessed with a mini mushroom, so this power-up just adds an extra level of challenge. Level 2-3 takes you into a dark underground section that is illuminated by fireballs from piranha plants. Getting a fire flower makes navigating much easier, and this level is pretty easy as long as you take your time. There are these weird, huge fireball enemies that change size, and those can be pretty tricky to get around sometimes. Getting a star lights up the whole level, which is pretty nice. On to level 2-Castle, where you have to jump around moving grates to get to the top of the tower. And while you're platforming, purple magic fireballs will be shooting at you, making things more difficult. Once you reach the top, there's a quick boss fight with Roy, and now this level is done. Next up we have a green mushroom house where you can earn some 1-ups by playing 1-up blast, where you shoot out of a cannon and try to pick up as many 1-ups as possible. I like how short this one is compared to power-up panels. Level 2-4 has some super strong winds, which means you have to time things just right. There is a secret exit in this level that leads to a pipe which brings you right to the final castle of this world, but we're gonna go the long way first. You can either go right or left to progress forwards, so let's start with level 2-5. This level is full of Pokies and evil Lakitus that throw Spinies at you. But luckily you're given a Yoshi, which makes things a lot easier. You can actually eat the Lakitu and hop on his cloud, and then you can fly wherever you want for a limited time. Once you're done here, you say goodbye to Yoshi and move on to level 2-6, which has a big pink rotating mushroom block that you have to stay on top of. A propeller mushroom makes this level much easier, although these flame chomps make things pretty tough. This level also has a secret exit that leads to a cannon that shoots you over to World 5. But we're not done with World 2 yet, so let's head over to the final castle of this world. This is an auto-scroll level, so you have to keep up with the camera. And there's a couple parts where you have to choose one of 3 tunnels, and only one of them is right. If you get it wrong, you'll start back at the last section, and if you get it right, you'll be able to move on. Once you get past all those, it's time for our rematch with Roy. Kamek comes in and makes some huge pipes for Roy to jump in and out of, but all you have to do is jump on him right when he comes out of his shell and this fight is over. Now let's move on to World 3. World 3 is mostly snow themed, with a big focus on the new penguin suit power-up. Level 3-1 has you dodging penguins and working your way across lots of icy platforms. Obviously this level is made much easier with the penguin suit so you don't slide all over the place on the ice. You can even press down while running to do a belly slide and break through blocks. Level 3-2 is full of trees and bullet bills, and near the end of the level it can get pretty crazy with so many bullet bills on screen. Level 3-3 takes us to the icy underground, where there's large blocks of ice floating in the water that you have to jump on. There's also lots of icicles that fall from the ceiling once you go below them, so this level is really hard without the penguin suit since you slip and slide everywhere. The next level is a ghost mansion, where there's lots of tricks and deception. There are multiple different doors, and you have to figure out which one actually works. Some of them are hidden behind walls, which can be pretty difficult to find. Of course, ghost mansions are full of boos, which move towards you when you're not looking but freeze once you turn to stare at them. At the end, there's this cool section where you're falling down a long hallway and you have to keep switching to look at both sides so the boos don't get you. There's also a secret exit in this level that leads to a cannon that shoots you to World 6. Moving on to 3-Castle, you have to jump around some huge rotating puzzle pieces and work your way upwards. Then there's some platforms that raise slowly once you get on them with tons of dry bones to defeat. Some giant spiky balls are thrown in which aren't so easily defeated. Once you get past all that, it's time for a fight with Lemmy. Lemmy balances on top of a bouncy ball and throws balls at you to try to push you off the cliffs on both sides. It can be tough since this fight is on ice, but it's nothing too crazy. Lemmy hops away and we're on to level 3-4. This level can be pretty hard because you can get smashed between some large moving pieces of ice that are surrounded by cliffs on all sides. The first time you complete this level, you're forced to take a secret exit that just leads to another level instead of the final castle. This is level 3-5 where you have to stay on top of another pink rotating mushroom square that moves up into the air. Luckily there are lots of propeller boxes laying around, so that makes it much easier. Once you finish that level, you get access to a big red button that adds extra blocks back into level 3-4. So you have to replay this level again, but it's much easier this time around since there's so many extra blocks to jump on. And now we can get to this red pipe that we couldn't reach before, which leads to the normal flagpole. Finally, we can move on to the final castle of World 3, where once again there's lots of ice. There's this icy snake block section that always gave me huge amounts of stress as a kid because I was constantly worried that it would leave me behind. But replaying it today, it really isn't that bad. The next big section involves lots of bob-ombs and another icy snake block. As long as you keep up with it, you'll be on to the boss fight in no time. It's time to fight Lemmy again, only this time his bouncy ball is much bigger thanks to a little help from Kamek. This fight is actually pretty fun since you have to bounce off the balls he throws at you to get high enough to jump on his head. Once he's defeated, we're moving on to World 4. World 4 is themed around the beach and the ocean, a very different vibe than the snowy levels of World 3. Level 4-1 surprisingly still uses the penguin suit, and it looks a little funny to be dressed up as a penguin in this super tropical looking environment. But it is very useful, as swimming is made much easier as a penguin since you have full control of Mario underwater. I don't know why normal swimming isn't like this, but it's nice to have when you have the penguin suit on. There are lots of fishes and sea urchins to avoid, and those annoying purple fishes return, but they're pretty easy to avoid if you have the penguin suit on. There's a final stretch with lots of sea urchins, and now we move on to level 4-2. Or at least we would, but this giant fish attacks you before you can do that. But once that's taken care of, we can get to the next level. This level is similar to some classic 2D Mario games, with lots of Cheep Cheeps jumping up at you as you run across a long bridge. Then you have to dodge Cheep Cheeps while climbing on some skinny cliffs, and then this level is finished. Level 4-3 has you on the beach while avoiding some crabs that throw rocks, or balls of dirt, or something, I can't really tell. There's also some more water sections with sea urchins, so it's pretty basic beach level stuff. Moving on to level 4-Castle, we have some giant metal blocks that fall off of conveyor belts. Jumping around on top of these huge blocks as they move is pretty fun, although it gets a lot more scary once you have to avoid them and try not to get crushed. The fight with Wendy is pretty easy as long as you manage to avoid all of her weird glowing rings. Wendy gets away and we can go to level 4-4. This entire level is underwater, with lots of bloopers and purple fishes. Combining pipes that blow air upwards and bloopers is a really frustrating combination, but finally this level is completed. Next up we have another ghost mansion, and this one has more moving platforms and rats. There is this part with the P-switch that can be confusing, but overall I think this ghost mansion is easier than the one in World 3. Once that's done, we can move on to level 4-5, a beach-themed level with lots of Lakitus, both good and bad. Some will throw coins while others will throw spinies. Once again, you get Yoshi, so that makes this level a lot easier. You can really just skip over a lot of this level by stealing one of the Lakitu's clouds, and now this level is completed. The final castle of World 4 has you avoiding large drills and jumping between metal grates. Later in the level, there's this super long drill that you have to hide from while crouching in these tiny holes in the ground. This is one of my favorite parts in any castle level. It's so much fun to run really fast and try not to get hit by this giant drill. During the rematch fight with Wendy, Kamek comes in and floods the whole area, making things a lot harder. The water rises and falls, and you can only jump on Wendy when she's not underwater. This is definitely one of the tougher Koopaling fights, but maybe that's just because I'm bad at controlling Mario in the water. Wendy is defeated and you think it would be time to move on, but there's actually one more level in World 4. This is an airship level with lots of fire, Mecha Koopas, and some cannons that fire bob-ombs. I always love how epic airship levels feel. It feels like Mario is taking down this huge enemy base all by himself. Next we have a fight with Bowser Jr., where we have to use a propeller box to fly high above him and jump on it. It's a pretty easy fight, but it's nice to fight someone higher up in power than just one of the basic Koopalings. Now that the airship is completed, we can go on to World 5. World 5 is themed around the jungle, and there's also lots of piranha plants. Starting off with level 5-1, we have these weird piranha plants with legs that are really freaky looking. Then there's these piranha plants that shoot spiky balls and keep them in the air, and luckily they're taken out pretty easily with an ice flower. There's also these vines that Mario can grab onto and swing on, and these are pretty fun to mess around with. I always love anything that has to do with building momentum in a 2D platforming game. Then the last challenge is this Ferris wheel type thing made of 4 platforms that you have to move by spinning it. Once you get past the piranha plant in your way, we can move on to level 5-2, which is full of wigglers. You start by getting past some small wigglers, but you move underground where some ginormous wigglers run around and you have to avoid them and also jump off of them to finish the level. Next up we have level 5-3, which has lots of these weird enemies called brambles. There's also a lot of poison which kills you in one hit, so this level can be pretty difficult. You really have to time things just right to get through this level successfully. I think World 5 is where a lot more of the difficult platforming challenges come in. You actually have to focus on what you're doing now instead of just floating through levels easily. Onto this world's first castle, you have to navigate upwards while avoiding these huge walls of shifting spikes. Once again, timing is really important here. Once you get to the top, you have to fight Iggy on 3 moving platforms. These platforms make it harder to avoid Iggy when he spins around in his shell, but this is still a pretty standard 2D Mario boss fight. Now that Iggy is defeated, we can move on to level 5-4. This level is pretty unique. You have to stay on top of a floating raft that has a big number in the center that shows you how many enemies are on the raft. If the number reaches 5, the raft will stop and start to sink. This level is pure chaos, and I thought it was actually pretty fun. The ice flower comes in handy since you can freeze enemies and throw them to take out lots of them at once. Once this level is completed, we can go on to the Ghost Mansion of World 5. This mansion turns the lights off and makes you carry around these light blocks so you can see where you're going. There's tons of doors that all lead to different rooms, and it can get confusing pretty fast and it's tough to know where you're supposed to go. This level has a secret exit that leads you to another cannon that shoots you all the way to World 8. There are so many cannons in this game, it's almost like the developers want you to skip large sections of the game. But we aren't going to do that, so let's move on to level 5-5. This is an auto-scroll level that requires you to jump across these weird flying green manta ray things and avoid bullet bills. There is a propeller block so you can stay airborne longer, and that really helps out. Hit the top of the flagpole and we're on to the final castle of this world. This level looks like a classic 2D Mario castle, with lava and lava bubbles popping out to hit you. There's also these big rotating metal grates that make for some pretty interesting platforming. Green magic fireballs are constantly shooting at you, which makes things even more difficult. As usual, Kamek flies in to make the second fight with Iggy harder by making a huge chain chomp that pulls Iggy around the screen. So you have to chase down Iggy while avoiding his green magic fireballs. Now that that's done, we can move on to World 6. World 6 is mountain themed with lots of bullet bills and piranha plants too. Level 6-1 is full of spikes that throw big boulders down at you. There's a lot of these shallow cliffs that you have to go through, which makes it harder to avoid all the big boulders. A whole bunch of bullet bills are thrown in near the end, and now this level is finished. Now we have another split path, so let's start with level 6-2. This level takes place underground, with spinning circles of land, piranha plants, and spinies that fall from the ceiling. Once you get past these two annoying sledge bros, this level is done. Level 6-3 is another underground level, but this time it deals with rising and sinking water. A fire flower is super useful in this level to take out all the piranha plants, and just like that, this level is over. Level 6-4 has a ton of Monty moles that hop out of the dirt and run at you wildly. These can be pretty difficult to avoid, so thankfully we have Yoshi here to help us. Yoshi makes this level a breeze, and now we're already on to this world's first castle. I really like this castle because it has two huge spiky drills that shoot upwards that you have to avoid. It's so much fun to hurry and get out of their way before they launch towards you. Then near the top there are these cool pipe cannons that you have to use at just the right time to not get hit. The first fight with Morton is actually pretty difficult, since there are drills on both sides and his shell bounces back and forth really quickly. Once he's down, he hops further up the mountain and we're on to level 6-5. This level takes place in this little mini oasis on the mountain, and you're constantly being chased by the big fish from World 4. The water level moves up and down, making it harder to dodge the big fish. This can be a pretty annoying level, but once it's done we can move on to level 6-6, yet another underground level. This time you're in the dark on a raft where you control where the light shines using motion controls. It's hard to multitask and try to control Mario and the light at the same time, and of course the water level also rises to make things even more complicated. There are a couple fire bros in your way, and then this level is completed. Now to get to the castle you'll have to go through this huge wave of bullet bills, and you'll probably get hit at least once, but a couple extra mushrooms never hurt. The final castle of this world has giant swinging platforms that dip in and out of the lava, so you have to be careful and watch where you're standing. Then you throw in a lot of big spiky balls falling from the ceiling, and you have a pretty tough challenge. Then there's the boss fight where Kamek makes the floor smash into the ceiling, but I think this fight is actually easier than the first fight with Morton. We have another airship to complete before we can move on, and this one has lots of little moles that pop up and throw wrenches at you. There's also some small spinning circles you have to jump around on, and your control has to be pretty precise to survive. Now we have another fight with Bowser Jr., but this one is a lot more fun. You get your own clown car to ride in and you basically play a game of deadly bumper cars. This is one of the most enjoyable boss fights in the whole game, as it isn't the usual wait and jump formula. Now that Bowser Jr. is defeated, we can move on to World 7. World 7 is themed around the sky and big mushrooms. Jumping right into level 7-1, we have some giant colorful blocks in the sky that move back and forth. There's also lots of pipes with some piranha plants. The most important thing here is to make sure you time your jumps right. Now on to level 7-2, where there's some chain chomps and floating water bubbles. The chain chomps can be pretty tough to get around as they suddenly jump forward and try to bite you. These floating water sections are pretty cool, and they get extra tricky once you throw in some bullet bills since they move slower in the water. Once this level's done, we can go on to level 7-3, which has a lot of these spiky black fuzzies that are on the same rails as the platforms, so you have to watch out for them. Then some giant black fuzzies are thrown in, so you have to avoid those while staying on the moving platform. This is another one of those levels where a propeller mushroom comes in handy. Now it's time for level 7-Castle, where you have to go upwards on a platform that you control with motion controls as tons of enemies are thrown at you. This castle is actually pretty difficult since you have to do so many things at once. The Bob-omb section especially took me a couple tries to successfully complete. Then we have a fight with Ludwig, which can be pretty annoying since he flutters around in the air like Yoshi so you can't tell when he's going to land. You can actually skip the fight with Ludwig if you find the secret exit which leads higher up into the clouds. The level up here is really hard. You have to jump around on some parabeetles, with the smaller ones flying higher when you stand on them, and the bigger ones sinking down. Even with a Yoshi, this level is quite difficult, and it's definitely one of the hardest challenges in the game. But if you can manage to complete this level, it will give you access to a secret path that takes you straight to the final boss of this world. But before we get there, let's go down and take the normal path. The ghost house for this world has lots of these weird ghosts with boxing gloves called bruisers. They launch barrels at you and also attack you. They also take 3 hits to kill, so these are pretty tough enemies. Then there's this super cool section where you fall down a long hall of boos and you have to dodge them as you fall. Then you go outside and face these really annoying birds, and then this level is done. Moving on to level 7-4, there's some more platforms that you control with motion controls, but this time you don't have to be standing on them. There's also a lot of moving pipes and some huge bullet bills. More motion control platforms, more moving pipes, you get the idea. Level 7-5 has some mini Goombas and these clouds that blow clouds to block your view. Using a propeller mushroom will let you get rid of these clouds, so this is a pretty simple level with that power up. Finally, we can get to the big castle of this world, where some more giant drills and sledge bros wait for us. Or we can just take that secret path from before and get straight to the rematch with Ludwig. This is one of the most interesting Koopaling fights, since you're fighting on these 3 platforms that are shooting upwards, so you have to be extra careful not to fall. Once that fight is done, we can get to the final section of this game, World 8. World 8 is where Bowser is, so naturally there's lots of lava. Starting in level 8-1, there are lava rocks falling from the sky and a huge cloud of evilness chasing you throughout the whole level. There's also lava that shoots up into the air and metal blocks that start sinking once you stand on them. This level is pure chaos, and it's just the beginning of World 8. Level 8-2 takes you underground, so at least there aren't lava rocks raining down from above anymore. But there are spinning circles of land and lots of spiky balls. The spiky balls move at different speeds depending on the rotation of the circle they're on, so timing is very important. There's also some extra big Goombas to spice things up. This level has a secret exit which takes you to one of my favorite levels in the entire game, level 8-7. In this level you have to try and stay on top of a bone roller coaster, and it's a blast. I loved this level when I was younger, and I still love it now. Beating this level will take you straight to the airship of this world, but let's go the normal way first. Level 8-3 has waves of lava and some platforms that fall rapidly when you land on them. Although they don't fall if you jump off an enemy on that platform, and I'm pretty sure that's not how physics work. Then there's this tough section where you have to make your way through this small tunnel while avoiding the waves of lava. The timing is pretty tight here, so you'll have to be quick. Make your way across a couple of sinking platforms and this level is done. Now we're on to level 8-Castle, where there's some shifting platforms and rows of spinning fireballs. There's this part that's pretty hard where you have to race upwards and avoid getting crushed. Now we have the final mini-boss of the game, and this time it's just Kamek and no one else. For how difficult this world has been so far, this fight is pretty easy. Moving on to level 8-4, we have an underground dark water level. There are some E-rated versions of anglerfish swimming around, and some dudes up above chucking rocks at you. This last part with the pipes and jellyfish is really hard since the pipes blow you straight into all the enemies. But once that's done, we can go on to level 8-4. This level is an auto-scroll level with a platform you control with motion controls while enemies fall down on top of you. Throw in some lava fountains and those annoying birds, and this can be a pretty tricky level. Level 8-6 is pretty awesome since you're inside a volcano and you work your way up as the lava follows you. Once again, a propeller mushroom makes this level a whole lot easier. This really is the best power-up in the game. The airship of World 8 shoots a whole bunch of cannonballs at your face, and there are some tough time sections where you have to be speedy to not be squashed. Now we have the final fight with Bowser Jr., where he upgrades his clown car to shoot some massive spiky bombs. You have to ground pound at the right time to fling the bomb up into the air and hit Bowser Jr. These fights with Bowser Jr. are always more entertaining than the normal Koopaling fights. And once he's defeated, we can finally go see Princess Peach. But before we can rescue her, Kamek comes in and steals her and flies away. The ground starts to shake and a bridge comes out of the lava that leads to an enormous structure, Bowser's Castle. This is the final challenge of the game, and it's a pretty epic castle level. There are these bone platforms that slowly fall when you touch them, and there's a section where you have to jump from platform to platform to avoid going in the lava. Overall though, this castle really isn't that difficult or memorable to me, but luckily the final boss fight more than makes up for it. I love how the checkpoint flag is put right outside the doors to the fight because the developers knew you'd probably need a couple tries to beat this fight. We start in this super long cinematic hallway where fireballs are shooting at us. This is such a great opening and it really hypes you up for the fight. And here we are in a showdown with Bowser to save Peach. And all we have to do is avoid a couple fireballs, run underneath him, jump on this button, and we're done. I told you this fight was worth it. Such an amazing boss fight, one of my favorites of all time, and now we finally get to... Huh? Okay, now it's time to face the real final fight of this game, an absolutely massive Bowser attacking us while we try our best to stay alive. This fight is actually pretty hard. There's fireballs, waves of lava, moving platforms, and Bowser trying to hit us. But once you get to the end of this relentless attack, we have an even bigger red button to jump on, and this time we defeat Bowser for real. This is a pretty memorable boss fight to me, and the fake out with Kamek pretending to be Peach is legendary. Now we can finally reunite with the real Princess Peach, and we get this cute little cutscene of Peach and Mario flying away in a hot air balloon. I also love the end credits where you can jump around and break the letters of the names of the talented people who made this game. Now that this game is finished, Bowser gets crushed by his own castle, and you unlock an extra bonus world, World 9. I was going to cover this world, but you have to collect all the star coins to play the levels, so me claiming that there isn't much reason to collect star coins definitely came back to bite me. I don't really have the patience to go back and collect every single star coin from every level, so enjoy some short gameplay of someone else who's way better at this game than I am. I apologize for not covering World 9 in depth, but this video has already taken me way longer than I thought it would, so let's wrap this up. And that was a very long nostalgia rewind for New Super Mario Bros. Wii. I wasn't expecting this video to be so long, but this game has a lot of content to cover. I have a lot of great childhood memories with this game, and it was a lot of fun to revisit it. The New Super Mario Bros. Games get a lot of crap, but I think this game is still pretty good, although Nintendo definitely has better 2D series like Donkey Kong Country and Metroid. If you can't tell, New Super Mario Bros. Wii is my personal favorite of this series, but that's probably just because of nostalgia. Anyways, this video has gone on for long enough. Hopefully you enjoyed this nostalgia rewind. Let me know down in the comments what you think, and if you have any fond memories with this game, be sure to share those too. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see ya in the next one.